You're being robbed right now, not by some stranger in a dark alley, but by the person staring back at you in the mirror every single morning. And here's what makes it absolutely terrifying. You're doing it on purpose. You think you understand money. You think you're making rational decisions. But I'm going to show you something that'll make your stomach turn. The mathematical proof that everything you believe about building wealth is precisely catastrophically backwards. The enemy isn't your salary. It isn't the economy. It isn't your boss or your circumstances. The enemy is the voice in your head telling you comfortable lies. Let me tell you what I've watched happen for 30 years, over and over, like some cruel financial Groundhog Day. Smart people, people far smarter than me, wake up one morning at 45 years old and realize they're trapped. Completely, utterly trapped. They're making decent money, maybe 70, 80, even $100,000 a year, and they can't quit. They can't take risks. They can't pursue what actually matters to them. Why? Because they've built a prison cell so comfortable, so perfectly calibrated to their income that the bars are invisible until they try to leave. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Your lifestyle is not a reflection of your success. It's a reflection of your fear. Every single upgrade you make, the nicer car, the bigger house, the premium everything, isn't bringing you closer to freedom. It's another lock on the cage. And you know what the absolute worst part is? You're doing it deliberately. You're choosing the cage because it feels like winning. I've sat across from people making $200,000 a year who are more financially trapped than people making $40,000. How is that possible? Because the person making $40,000 kept their lifestyle at $30,000 and invested the difference for 15 years. Meanwhile, the high earner upgraded everything the moment they could afford it. New car every 3 years, house in the right neighborhood, private schools, vacations that cost what some people make in 6 months. They're on a treadmill running faster and faster, and they call it success. But here's the mathematical reality that'll punch you in the gut. If you make $100,000 and spend $95,000, you have exactly $5,000 working for you. If you make $50,000 and spend $35,000, you have $15,000 working for you. You're not 3 times poorer. You're 3 times richer in the only metric that actually matters, the gap between what comes in and what goes out. That gap is your freedom measured in dollars. That gap is your options. That gap is every future choice you'll get to make without someone else's permission. And most people spend their entire lives methodically, religiously closing that gap until it disappears completely. Then they wonder why they feel stuck. They blame the system. They blame the economy. They blame their parents for not teaching them. But the enemy was never external. The enemy is the voice that whispers, you deserve this, you've earned it, you work hard, everyone else has it, just this once, you can afford the payment. That voice is bankrupting you one justified purchase at a time. You want to know the single greatest wealth destroyer in modern society? It's not taxes. It's not inflation. It's not even poor investment choices. It's debt, consumer debt. The kind you signed up for voluntarily because someone convinced you that monthly payments equal affordability. Let me break down the mathematics of how thoroughly debt is destroying you, and I need you to actually hear this, not just nod along and forget it tomorrow. When you finance a $30,000 car at 6% for 5 years, you're not buying a car. You're buying a depreciating asset that'll be worth maybe $15,000 when you finish paying, and you'll have paid $35,000 total. You just lit $10,000 on fire for the privilege of driving something newer than you needed. But it gets worse, so much worse. That $500 monthly payment, that's not just $500. That's $500 that could have been invested every single month for 5 years. At a modest 8% return, that's $36,000. Not the $30,000 you paid for the car, $36,000 in investment value. And if you left that invested for 20 more years without adding another dime, it becomes $167,000. You didn't buy a car. You sold your 50s for a depreciating hunk of metal. You traded a decade of freedom for the feeling of success right now. And you probably did it multiple times because the first loan felt normal, so the second one felt normal, then the third. I've watched people justify debt with the most creative mental gymnastics imaginable, but I need reliable transportation for work. You need transportation. You don't need a new car. But the interest rate is so low. The interest rate doesn't matter when you're financing something that loses value the moment you sign. But everyone finances cars. Everyone is broke, too. Notice the connection? Here's what debt actually does to your psychology. It normalizes spending future money. Once you accept one payment, your brain recalibrates what's acceptable. $500 a month becomes your new baseline. Then you add another $300 for furniture. Then another $250 for that motorcycle you absolutely had to have. Suddenly you're sending out $1,000 monthly to pay for things you already own, things that are worth less than you owe, and you can't even feel the change because they were added one link at a time. The credit card companies figured this out decades ago. They know you're not doing the math. They know that when you see minimum payment $35, your brain doesn't calculate that you'll pay for 9 years and triple the original cost. They know you're focused on whether you can afford it this month, not whether you're systematically destroying your future. And you're falling for it every single time. The amount of wealth transferred from people like you to banks and lenders is staggering, and it's completely voluntary. You're signing up to be poor later so you can feel rich now. There's a guy in your neighborhood right now worth $2 million. You've never noticed him because he drives a 10-year-old Toyota, and his house looks exactly like yours, maybe smaller. Meanwhile, you're noticing the family 3 doors down with the Range Rover in the driveway, the one with the boat parked on the side yard, and the outdoor kitchen that cost more than your first car. You think they're winning. You're watching the wrong person. The guy with the Toyota, he's been maxing out his retirement accounts for 25 years. He invests the difference between what he could spend and what he actually spends. He doesn't care what you think about his car. He cares about the number in his brokerage account that grows every single month while he sleeps. The family with the Range Rover, they're drowning. They're making payments on everything you see. The boat gets used twice a year. The outdoor kitchen is financed. That Range Rover, leased because they couldn't even afford to finance it. Here's what I've learned watching people for decades. Appearing wealthy and being wealthy are not just different. They're opposite strategies that cannot coexist. Every dollar you spend on appearing successful is a dollar that can't compound into actual success. You're choosing the costume over the reality. And the absolute tragedy is that the costume is what gets you respect at the neighborhood barbecue, while the reality is what determines whether you're free or trapped. You can't have both. The math doesn't work. If you make $100,000 a year, you can either live like you make $100,000 and die broke, or live like you make $60,000 and retire wealthy. There is no third option where you spend everything and somehow build wealth anyway. That's a fantasy sold by people who want your money. The truly wealthy people I know, the ones with actual millions in the bank, they're weird about money in ways that'll shock you. They still check prices at the grocery store. They drive cars until the wheels fall off. They think about purchases for weeks before making them. They're not cheap, they're intentional. Every dollar is a soldier they're deploying strategically, not confetti to throw at whatever catches their attention. Meanwhile, the people trying to look wealthy are bleeding money from every direction. Premium cable packages they barely watch, gym memberships they never use, subscription services they forgot they signed up for, restaurant meals 4 times a week because cooking feels like work. It's death by 1,000 small decisions, none of which feels significant in the moment, all of which compound into systematic poverty. You want to know the really brutal truth? The neighborhood is watching. You spend, and they're judging you as successful based on your consumption. They have no idea what's in your bank account, and they never will. You're performing for an audience that doesn't care about you, using money you don't have to buy things you don't need to impress people who aren't paying attention. And 20 years from now, when you're still working because you have to, you'll finally understand that the only opinion that mattered was your own future selves, and that person is screaming at you right now to stop. Let me show you something that'll either change your life or make you sick, depending on how old you are and what you've done so far. Compound interest is the closest thing to magic that exists in the financial world, and almost nobody actually uses it because it requires the one thing humans are terrible at: patience. Here's the math that should terrify you if you're wasting time. If you invest $500 a month starting at age 25, earning an average 8% annual return, by age 65 you'll have over $1.7 million. You personally contributed $240,000. The market gave you $1.4 million for free, just for showing up consistently and not touching it. Now here's the gut punch. If you wait until 35 to start that same $500 monthly, you end up with about $750,000. You waited 10 years and it cost you $1 million. Not because you contributed less, though you did, but because you missed the exponential growth years where money makes money makes money. This is why your 20s and 30s are so catastrophically important, and why spending those years financing lifestyles instead of building capital is financial suicide. Every year you delay is multiple years you're stealing from your future. But here's what actually happens in the real world. People in their 20s think retirement is so far away it's not real. People in their 30s are busy upgrading their lives. People in their 40s suddenly panic and realize they're behind, but now they're trapped in the expensive lifestyle they built. People in their 50s are terrified, but it's too late to catch up without radical changes they're not willing to make. I've watched this cycle repeat thousands of times. The math is simple. The execution is rare. You know what compounds besides money? Habits. Debt compounds. Lifestyle inflation compounds. Every bad decision you normalize makes the next bad decision easier. You finance one car, and suddenly financing cars is just what you do. You carry a credit card balance 1 month, and somehow you're still carrying it 5 years later. You skip investing this year because you're busy, and then you skip next year and the year after that. Meanwhile, the invisible force of compound interest is working, just not for you. It's working for the banks collecting interest on your debt, for the car companies selling you loans, for every corporation that's figured out how to get you spending instead of saving. Here's the part that should make you angry. This information isn't secret. It's not hidden. Every single person knows that starting early and investing consistently builds wealth. It's the most repeated financial advice in existence. And almost nobody does it. Why? Because knowing and doing are separated by a canyon filled with psychological traps, instant gratification, social pressure, and 1,000 small choices that feel insignificant in the moment. You're not failing because you're stupid. You're failing because your brain is wired to prioritize today over 20 years from now, and you never learned to override that programming. The wealthy people, they learn to override it. They force themselves to care about future consequences more than present comfort. That's the entire difference. Not intelligence, not luck, not circumstances, just the ability to delay gratification and let math do the work. Here's a lie you've been telling yourself. I'll start investing when I make more money. That's the most expensive sentence in the English language. I've heard it from people making $30,000 a year. I've heard it from people making $300,000 a year. You know what they have in common? They're both broke. Because the problem was never the income. It was the story they kept telling themselves about what they'd do when the income arrived. Let me tell you what actually happens when your income increases. Your spending increases to match it, sometimes faster. You get a raise and suddenly you deserve a nicer apartment. You get a promotion and that old car feels embarrassing. You get a bonus and it evaporates into a vacation you'll barely remember in 6 months. This isn't a character flaw. This is called lifestyle inflation, and it's the silent killer of every financial plan you'll ever make. I've watched people go from making $40,000 to making $120,000 over 10 years, and their net worth barely moved. How is that possible? They upgraded everything in perfect proportion to their income growth. The math is brutal. If you save 10% when you make $40,000, that's $4,000 a year. If you still save 10% when you make $120,000, that's $12,000 a year. Sounds like progress, right? Wrong. Because if you'd kept your lifestyle at 50,000 and saved 70,000 instead, you'd be wealthy in 5 years. But you didn't. You bought the lifestyle you thought successful people have, and now you were trapped at a higher altitude, but still on the same treadmill. Here's what nobody wants to hear. You can build significant wealth on a modest income if you're willing to live below your means for long enough. A person making 50,000 who lives on 35,000 and invests 15,000 annually will be wealthier than someone making 100,000 who invests 10,000. Not in theory, in mathematical certainty. The 15,000 investor puts away 30% of income. In 20 years at 8% returns, that's over $680,000. The 10,000 investor, $457,000. The person making half as much ends up 40% wealthier because they understood that wealth is built in the gap, not in the gross number. Your income is irrelevant if you spend all of it. Your income is transformative if you create space between earning and spending. But here's where it gets psychological. Living below your means feels like losing. It feels like deprivation. It feels like you're not successful when everyone around you is upgrading and celebrating and posting their purchases on social media. You're watching people buy things, and your brain screams that you're falling behind. You're not falling behind. They are. They're trading their future for applause today. You're building capital they'll never have because they can't stop performing wealth long enough to actually become wealthy. This is the hardest part, having the discipline to look unsuccessful while becoming successful. Most people can't do it. They need the external validation more than they need the internal security. So they spend their lives chasing the appearance of wealth and never experiencing the reality of it. The question is, which person are you going to be? You cannot willpower your way to wealth. I need you to understand this completely. If your financial plan requires constant discipline and perfect decision-making every single day, you've already lost. Willpower is a finite resource that depletes throughout the day, and you're using it to fight against billion-dollar marketing machines designed specifically to separate you from your money. You're bringing a knife to a gunfight and wondering why you keep losing. The only people who win with money are the ones who built systems that remove decision-making from the equation entirely. Let me show you what I mean. The wealthy people I know don't rely on remembering to invest. They automated it. Money moves from their paycheck to their investment accounts before they ever see it. They're not more disciplined than you. They're not testing their discipline at all. They made one good decision, automated it, and now that good decision happens whether they feel like it or not. Here's how you actually build wealth. You set up automatic transfers the day after payday. Before you pay bills, before you buy groceries, before you do anything else, money disappears into investments. Not what's left over. Not if you feel like it. Not when it's convenient. Automatically, non-negotiably, every single month, you're paying your future self first, and everyone else gets what remains. This is the only method that actually works long-term because it doesn't require you to be a different person with superhuman discipline. It requires you to be smart once, then lazy forever. The automation does the discipline for you. Most people do this backwards. They pay everyone else first, the landlord, the credit card company, the car payment, the streaming services, the restaurants, the random stuff they didn't need, and then they see what's left for investing. You know what's left? Nothing. There's always something else to spend it on. There's always a reason this month is different. I've watched people swear they'll invest their tax refund, then it's gone in 6 weeks and they can't tell you where it went. I've watched people promise they'll save their bonus, then they're buying furniture they don't need because the money was extra. Money is never extra. Money is either working for you or working against you. When it sits in checking, it's screaming to be spent. When it's locked in investments, it's quietly growing while you're not paying attention. The system matters more than intentions. Your intentions are worthless. Show me your automatic transfers and I'll show you your future net worth. Show me your budget written in a notebook that you review sometimes, and I'll show you someone who'll be working until they're 70. Here's the brutal part about systems. They reveal what you actually prioritize versus what you say you prioritize. If you automate $500 a month to investments, you're telling the truth about wanting wealth. If you say you want wealth, but you never set up the automation because you're afraid you won't have enough left over for your current lifestyle, you're lying to yourself. You don't want wealth. You want the comfortable fantasy of future wealth while maintaining present consumption. Those are incompatible goals. You have to choose. The system forces the choice. No system means you're choosing consumption every time and pretending it's temporary. It's not temporary, it's your life. Your automated transfers are your real financial plan, not the story you tell yourself about what you'll do someday when things settle down. Things never settle down. You either build the system or you don't. You know what separates people who build wealth from people who restart at zero every few years? It's not income. It's not investment genius. It's the emergency fund nobody wants to build because it's boring. Let me tell you what happens without one, and this pattern is so predictable I can set my watch by it. You start investing. You're finally doing it right. Money's going into retirement accounts. You're feeling good. Then the car breaks down. $1,500 repair. You don't have $1,500 sitting in cash because you've been investing everything. So what do? You put it on the credit card. Now you're paying 18% interest on a car repair while your investments earn maybe 8%. You just went backwards, but it gets worse. That credit card balance sits there. Minimum payments. You tell yourself you'll pay it off next month, but next month the water heater dies. Another $2,000 on the card. Then the medical bill, then the whatever. Suddenly you're carrying $5,000 in credit card debt, and you stop investing because you're trying to pay it down. Except you never fully pay it down because life keeps happening. This is the cycle that keeps people poor forever. They're reactive instead of prepared. Every unexpected expense becomes a crisis that derails months or years of progress. Meanwhile, the person with 6 months of expenses sitting in a boring savings account earning almost nothing, when their car breaks down, they write a check. When the water heater dies, they replace it. When they lose their job, they don't panic and cash out retirement accounts at massive penalties. They weather the storm and keep investing because the emergency fund absorbed the shock. That's its entire purpose. To be the boring buffer between you and catastrophe, but nobody wants to build it because it feels like dead money. It's not dead. It's the foundation that prevents everything else from collapsing. Here's the order that actually works. First, save $1,000 as fast as humanly possible. Cut everything. That's your starter emergency fund. Then pay off all consumer debt except mortgage using every spare dollar. Not minimum payments. Attack it. Then build 3 to 6 months of expenses in a high-yield savings account. Only then, only after you have that foundation, do you start aggressively investing. Most people skip straight to investing because it feels productive and exciting. Building an emergency fund feels like you're not making progress. But you know what real progress looks like? It looks like the ability to handle life without destroying your financial plan every time something breaks. It looks like not having to choose between fixing your car and eating. It looks like sleeping at night knowing you're not one emergency away from financial catastrophe. I've watched people with six-figure incomes live in constant financial anxiety because they have no buffer. Every unexpected expense is a crisis. They're making tremendous money and living like they're broke because they never built the foundation. Then I've watched people making $40,000 a year sleep peacefully because they have $20,000 in the bank. Same life events happen to both people. Car breaks down, medical issue, job loss. One person spirals into debt and panic. The other handles it and moves on. The difference isn't the income, it's the boring, unglamorous discipline of building a buffer before trying to build wealth. You can't build wealth without protection. You'll just keep restarting every time life happens, and life always happens. Let me tell you about the most expensive thing you own, your need to keep up with people who are lying to you. Every single day, you're surrounded by a carefully curated highlight reel of other people's financial decisions, and you're comparing your entire reality to their edited version. Your neighbor buys a new truck, and suddenly yours feels inadequate. Your coworker takes a European vacation, and you feel like you're missing out on life. Your college friend posts pictures from their new house, and your apartment feels like failure. Here's what you don't see: the $70,000 truck loan at 7% interest, the $8,000 in credit card debt from the vacation, the mortgage that requires both incomes and leaves zero room for error. You're comparing your balance sheet to their facade, and it's destroying you financially. Stop it right now, because this is the trap that's keeping you poor while making you feel justified about it. Social media has turned financial competition into a full-time spectator sport, and you're losing because you're playing a game where everyone's cheating. They're posting the wins and hiding the debt. They're showing the purchase and hiding the payment. They're displaying the lifestyle and concealing the anxiety. And you're sitting there feeling like you're behind, like you should be doing more, buying more, experiencing more. So you spend money you don't have on things you don't need to impress people who don't care, and you call it living your best life. It's not. It's financial suicide with an Instagram filter. The people who are actually building wealth, they're invisible. They're not posting their brokerage statements. They're not broadcasting their net worth. They're quietly, boringly, consistently investing while everyone else is performing. Here's the truth that'll set you free if you let it. Nobody is thinking about you as much as you think they are. Your car, your clothes, your house, your vacation. People notice for about 30 seconds, then they go back to worrying about their own lives. You're spending thousands of dollars for 30 seconds of attention from people whose opinion has zero impact on your actual well-being. And even worse, the people whose attention you're trying to capture are often broke themselves. You're seeking validation from people who are drowning financially, and you're using their approval as evidence you're doing well. It's insanity. The only comparison that matters is you versus your own financial goals. Are you closer to freedom than you were last year? Are you building capital or consuming it? Is your net worth growing, or are you just looking wealthier? I've sat with 60-year-olds who spent 40 years trying to impress their peers, and now they can't retire. They have the respect of people who are also broke and zero ability to stop working. They won the wrong game. They got the applause and lost their freedom. Meanwhile, the person nobody noticed, the one driving the paid-off Honda and living in the modest house, they retired at 55 and do whatever they want. They opted out of the comparison game entirely and won by default. You have the same choice right now. You can keep playing the comparison game and end up broke with everyone else, or you can ignore what everyone else is doing and build actual wealth. One path leads to comfort now and prison later. The other leads to discipline now and freedom later. Choose. So here we are. You've heard all of it, the mathematics, the psychology, the traps, the systems. And now comes the only question that actually matters. What are you going to do tomorrow? Not someday, not when things settle down, not when you make more money. Tomorrow, because I've given the same information to thousands of people, and I can predict with eerie accuracy who'll be wealthy in 20 years and who'll still be stuck. It has nothing to do with how smart they are or how much they earn. It has everything to do with what they do in the next 72 hours. The people who act immediately, who set up the automatic transfer before the motivation fades, who cut up the credit cards while they still feel the conviction, who write down the system and implement it this week. Those people change their lives. Everyone else? They nod along, they agree with everything, they feel inspired for about 48 hours, and then they slip right back into the exact patterns that were keeping them poor. The knowing didn't change them because knowing never changes anyone. Only doing changes people. Here's what I want you to understand. You're at a fork in the road right now, and you don't get to come back to this moment. You either take action while the information is fresh and the conviction is strong, or you rationalize your way back to comfort and nothing changes. There is no third option where you wait for the perfect time and then execute flawlessly. The perfect time doesn't exist. You're never going to feel completely ready. There will always be a reason to wait. Something coming up, an expense on the horizon, a plan you want to make first. Those are excuses your brain generates to protect you from the discomfort of change. Don't listen. The discomfort of change is temporary. The pain of staying stuck is permanent. You're either uncomfortable now while building wealth or uncomfortable later when you realize you can't stop working. Those are your options. Let me be very clear about what happens next. If you close this and go back to your regular life without changing anything, 6 months from now, you'll be in the exact same place financially, maybe worse. A year from now, you'll hear this same message somewhere else, feel the same conviction, and still do nothing. 5 years from now, you'll be older, more tired, and further behind, wondering where the time went. Or you can decide right now that the pattern ends today. You set up the automatic investment tomorrow. You call your credit card company and set up aggressive payments. You write down your expenses and identify what you're cutting. You stop performing wealth and start building it. You become the person in your neighborhood who looks ordinary and becomes extraordinary, the one nobody notices who ends up free. This isn't about perfection. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have setbacks. There will be months where you fall off the plan. That's fine. What matters is the trajectory, not the individual moments. Are you pointed toward wealth or away from it? Are your systems in place, even if you occasionally override them? Are you making progress, even if it's slower than you'd like? The people who win with money aren't the ones who never mess up. They're the ones who built systems that pull them back on track automatically. So here's your choice. Close this and let it become another piece of information you know but don't use, or treat this as the moment everything changed, the moment you stopped talking about money and started building wealth. What's it going to be?